Hi, welcome to day one of the Live Your Values Challenge. So, over the course of the next 4 days, we're going to help you go through a step by step process, really simple steps so that you can get your values in front of you and you can start using them to help influence how you live your life. So, this is the process that Heather and I went through to help us get focused on what was important to us and help us start to reclaim our life so that we weren't feeling so overwhelmed all the time, so that we weren't giving ourselves away all the time. So, over the course of the next 4 days, you are going to define your values, define what is really important to you. You are going to reflect on why those values are important to you and what it would mean to live a life by those values. Then we're going to set up some values based intentions that you can use every day to kind of focus on where you want to go, what you want to do that day. And then we're going to close with some rituals, help you to design some daily rituals that can really support you and allow you to live the life that you want, that makes it intentional and purposeful for you. So, my computer is losing power. I'm sorry about that. This is what happens. We're just going to move on and it's going to be okay.
Technology.
Exactly. It's back now. Okay. So, this first day is going to be focusing on you defining your values because the very first step is to get these values out of your head and onto paper. Although all of us have a sense of what our values are, we very rarely take the time to systematically think through what's important to us and why, and get it out of our head and something that we can kind of recognize. So, that's what we're going to start on today. Before we do, let's talk about what values actually are. So, values are fundamental beliefs that guide our behavior or our motivations or our actions. Values reflect our beliefs about what is good, what is desirable, what is worthwhile. Values are the driving factor behind purposeful, intentional action. So when we make a decision and we do something, that's informed by our values. Now, not just by our values. Of course, there are other things that influence our decisions, like our interests, even our habits, just things that we habitually do influence what we actually do. But one of the factors, and a factor that we can really control, are our values, and we can use them to make decisions that are in line with things that are really important to us. So when we're thinking about values, um, we recommend that you think of them in a few ways. First, you can think of character traits. So you can think of personality characteristics, things that quirks or aspects of yourself that are really important to you that help kind of drive your behavior. Think about your ideals, your beliefs, what you're passionate about, what you believe in as part of your values. As you're thinking about these values, remember to focus on the sort of positive values, the things that help you define what you think is good, right, fair, or just. As you're doing this, like we said, it can be character traits. It can also be behaviors. So, ways that you act, things that you do. So, think both about personality characteristics, about particular mindsets, and about behaviors, all that reflect things that are very important to you. Finally, all of those values, all of these things that are important to us really can serve as the bedrock of the decisions that we make to influence our life. And if we are aware of what our values are, it can have a really profound effect on the kinds of decisions that we make. Because right now, the chances are really good that you're kind of just being blown around by everybody else's agenda. And you may not even really feel like you have a lot of say in the decisions that you make. You may feel like you don't have a lot of autonomy, that you have to do what your family needs, that you have to do what your boss says. And it's not that you don't, of course you do, but you also get a say in all of that. So For you to have a say, you have to know what you want to say. That's what we're going to start working on. When you think about identifying your values, it's helpful to think about where your values come from and the different kinds of values. So, we're going to break this down into three main categories of values. Now, these categories are going to overlap. There will be some similarities in these different kinds of values, but that's okay. It helps us to kind of distinguish one from the other so that we can start thinking about our values and what is important to us. So, first, let's start with cultural values. Your cultural values are values that you grew up with and that you have taken on to inform your perspective of the world, your worldview, in a way that you may not even recognize because you started to learn these values when you were a very young child and as you were growing up. Most cultural values seem like they are universal. It seems like everybody holds these values, probably because most people in a culture do hold those values. Usually, cultural values are the kinds of things that you think of as being inherent in being a human being. They're often just taken for granted, like everybody feels this way. Like, for example, in the US, competition is a very important value. Most people in the US believe that human beings are inherently competitive. And that has to do with our cultural values. Other cultures value different things. And so people grow up with different beliefs about what it means to be inherently human. What's the characteristic of that? It's not that there's one that's right or that's wrong. It's just that they're different because they have different, influences from their culture.
Well, it definitely means those other cultures aren't winning, right?
Well, depends on how you mean what you mean by winning.
Not in the competition. They win.
Said the American, for
Said the
sure.
American.
So, with cultural values, it's not just differences by culture, there's also differences by generation. So, the way that we view what's good and right about the world is often the result of our generational influences. So, for example, Generation X is going to define quality of life differently than millennials or than boomers, and that's okay because it's just a reflection of your time. Okay, the next category that we're going to talk about are moral values. Moral values influence our sense of right and wrong. So when we make a decision about what the right thing is to do, that's tapping into our moral values. Moral values really govern our ethics, our behavior about what is right. These kinds of moral values govern our decision making. They govern what we decide to do when we think something is unjust or when we think something is just. These moral values shape our standards, what we have, like the minimum expectation all people should do this, or this is the right thing to do. Those are our standards of behavior. They're our moral values. Often we think of this just as our conscience, where we just feel like this is the right thing to do or this is the wrong thing to do. So, for you to define these kinds of moral values, it just really helps for you to think about when you have that feeling of like, this doesn't feel right, this feels unfair. Or that when you stood up for something because you felt like it was the right thing to do, even if it was a little bit scary. Those are often our moral values. Finally, we're going to talk about personal values. So, personal values are it's the collection of your life experiences. It's everything that has come into your life, who you are, how you've lived, and how that forms what you value, what you think is good and right. Our personal values are often our guiding principles. When we make decisions, we check in on what we believe to be true for ourselves, and then we act out of that. These are often our personally motivating forces. This is what kind of guides our behavior. It drives us to do particular things because we believe in something. These kinds of personal values are our primary reference points when we're making decisions, when we're evaluating if something is right or wrong, when we're evaluating if we like something or we don't like something. We're usually tapping into our personal values. Oftentimes these personal values are so important that we're willing to sacrifice something for it. So we're often willing to pay money to support a cause that is in line with our values, or we're willing to give up our time to support something that's in line with our values. These are part of our personal values. These kinds of personal values can be distinctive to
Or
an
you're willing to paint your face the team color.
Well, you're not wrong, right? That kind of that patriotism like that, or that kind of in group that's a value, that kind of cohesion, community. Absolutely, absolutely. And which community you pick is a very personal choice. Yeah. So, like that, these personal values really define who you are. There can be a lot of differences. So, for example, like sports teams, that can be a value that can be like your personal community. That's going to be different depending on where you live or your life experiences, but it can really kind of define who you are. And it's part of what makes you special and different and unique. Totally okay. So, those are the three areas we'd like you to start thinking about when you're thinking about your values, what you value, what is important to you, as we get started on the next stage. So, we've talked a little bit about what values are. Let's put this into action. I want you now to create a list of all of your values. To do that, we have some instructions. So grab a set of index cards or some Post-its. We have a worksheet that you could use that has card blocks defined. If you don't have any of those things, just get out a piece of paper and a pencil. You can use this, you can use the computer, you can type it out on the computer. We really recommend that you do this by hand. It's really powerful. If it's accessible to you, it's really powerful to write your own values in your own hand, if that is accessible to you.
Also, let me just tell you, as a lover of office supplies, which many adults are as well, there's nothing quite as satisfying as just quickly writing down a value on a Post-it and then sticking it, right? Stick it. It's awesome. I highly recommend it. It's very cathartic.
Exactly. It was so fun when we did this exercise, that part exactly. And you can just tear through them. Bling, 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 bling. Okay.
You felt so fulfilled. You're like, look at my stack of values. It was very nice.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. So that's going to be, have your setup, get your piece of paper, get your pencil.
Whoa. I need to talk about that curtain. That was super cool, Danny. Super cool.
I love the transitions. These things are so much fun. And you all should thank Heather for this tree business. Isn't that beautiful? It's a beautiful tree thing. Love it. Love it very much. Okay. Now back to work. Focus. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to spend the next 10 minutes. We're going to go through a brainstorm session. We'll do a little bit of sort of guided meditation stuff. We'll kind of bring you to this moment, ask you to give yourself permission to let go of all of your other distractions, to just come here for 10 minutes. And then you're really going to do just a brainstorming exercise. So we're going to give you a few suggestions, things for you to start thinking about. And what we want you to do is to generate like 20 to 25 words, 20 to 25 values, things that are important to you. So when you're doing this, we want you to write one word per card. So, per Post-it or per index card, or, per square on the worksheet. And to do this as quickly as possible for you to remove judgment about this. Don't analyze what comes up for you. Don't try to categorize it as good or bad or indifferent. Whatever happens right now, allow it to come up and just allow the words to flow out of you.
Let me give an example of something that I struggled with when I was going through this. I struggled with saying that I valued, attractiveness. Because immediately it was like, oh no, I don't want to be that person. And then I was like, you know what? It's okay to value that. It's okay for it to be important. And you should not have that immediate thing like, oh, I shouldn't. No. Shouldn't, coulda, woulda. It is what it is, and let's go with it. Remove that.
Exactly right. Just remove judgment. Allow it to happen, especially right now. I mean, like, we can't see where you are right now, so you can write whatever the hell you want. How would we possibly know? This is your time to just be honest. You want to take control of your life, you have to be honest with yourself. You
Know
don't
that.
ever have to show this to anyone. You can burn these after tomorrow. Well, wait a couple of days because we have another activity tomorrow, but nobody has to see them. So just give yourself permission to be open to whatever comes up for you. The other thing is, we all have that kind of critical, harsh voice in our head that's like, you're doing this wrong, or why did you think of that? That is not the voice that we want you to listen to right now. That voice is not helpful. What we want you to listen to is the very quiet, the very peaceful, the very wise, gentle voice that is speaking of from your true self. So that means you have to kind of get quiet for a minute because that chattering, that's the first thing you're here. It's like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Blah, 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 blah. You need to just give yourself a minute to be quiet, to allow that chatter voice to just settle for a minute so that you can start to hear your own inner wisdom, the truth about yourself. Okay. So just go with this for this process. Settle in and listen to that quiet, peaceful voice. When you do, just a quick reminder, your goal is to identify characteristics, traits, behaviors, things that you count as good or as right, as just, wholesome, the things that are positive traits that you admire and that you aspire to and that you act, things that are good. All right. Just remember that you're focusing on defining the positive values for yourself. And that the point of all this exercise with allowing your thoughts to just flow, to brainstorm words and to just throw words on the paper is that we're going to tap into your really deeply held beliefs. And because we have this kind of inner sensor, probably it's going to take a little bit of practice at first. At first it's probably going to be like that judgment, like, oh, I shouldn't do this. So what we're saying is just keep throwing words out there until you're no longer even thinking about the words. Just write a word on a card, move it through, move it through, move it through. By the time you get to the end of this 10 minutes, you will have gotten a list of values that are really important enough for you, as long as you can get out of your own way. Okay? So we're going to start. We're going to start with about a 10-minute meditation. Before we start this, we're going to get into a screen in just a minute. I want you to start by kind of settling into yourself. So before we get started on the meditation, find yourself in space. So if you're seated, pay attention to how you're seated. Try to align your body so that it's even, you're not off kilter. Make sure that your back has some support. Try not to like slouch. You want to try to make sure that you are supported wherever you are. That's probably enough. We're going to get you into a place that's settled, and then we're going to do a little bit of breathing, and then we're kind of going to get started. So there is one more quick point. If you'd like, sometimes it can be helpful to put your hand on your heart or to put your hand on your belly or somewhere that feels like you are connecting to yourself just as we get started. So, we ready? Do you have any other points, Heather, before we get started?
Meditation's your bag, but that's awesome. Yeah, I love it.
Okay. So we are going to go to the meditation right now. Okay, welcome back. So that was it. That was the first exercise for the first day. You now have hopefully a long list of values, a long list of characteristics that are really important to you. So your homework for
Wait,
tonight.
hold on. Good job.
Ah,
Hey, so that was kind of dope, right? Like that was a huge step that everybody took. And I mean, if you look at the words, like you probably have greater perspective than you had 10 minutes ago. I know I did the first time I did it. And I mean, and don't get me wrong, if you want to continue thinking about this and continue writing it down, so you've got a lot, we're going to use all of these tomorrow to group them together. Before Danny gets to the homework, geez, professor. But good job, everybody, I wanted to say.
thank you. Thank you. Right. So now you can see one of the weaknesses in my teaching. So good. Yeah. And actually, I mean, I really do hope that you had an experience, that you felt something that you haven't felt for a while, that you gave yourself the chance to have a moment and fill yourself with goodness. We'd like you to continue doing that. That's really the homework, is for you to continue feeling that way, to get in touch with your values, to reflect on your values. Also, we are posting a long list of values. So now that you've done some work on your own, you've generated this list of values. Now go back to this long list of values to see if there's anything else that you want to incorporate. You don't have to, it's not necessary, but sometimes people feel like there are things that are really important to them that just didn't happen to come up during this exercise. So this gives you an opportunity to add them.
Yeah, sometimes when you're going through an exercise like this, you're where you are mentally. And for example, the very first time that I did it, I was where I was at mentally. It was a tough time at work and everything was going on. And then I remember talking to Danny afterwards, and then she was just like, yeah, travel is such a huge value for me. And I stopped and I was like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. How did I miss travel? I was so focused on work that I had forgotten like this whole part of my life that was so critically important to me. So it's okay to look at that and go, oh my God. And when you have that oh my God moment, like take that first thought you have. Like I thought about travel and I thought about my sister and I going to Jamaica years and years ago. I thought about our trip to Hawaii. I thought about so many brambles and challenges we had in Europe when we were together, and that brought all these other values out. So allow yourself to have that moment. If you look at something and you realize, holy crap, I forgot that's really important to me, then go through that emotional experience again to trigger more values.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you can do tonight. That's that part of the homework, is to reflect on your values. If you want to look at the list and kind of expand on them, just spend the evening. If you want, do a little bit of meditation. These can be a sort of focused meditation. You can just visualize the values that you just envisioned. You can replay those wonderful memories in your mind over again. That's meditation, and that helps to kind of deepen these values. The more time you spend thinking about these values and keeping them at the front of their mind, the more likely you are to make decisions with those values in mind. So spend as much time as you want reflecting on those. Give yourself a little mini vacation. Before tomorrow, though, what we would like for you to do is to set up your values card. So, whatever you did to get your values written down, if you wrote it on a piece of paper, you have a long list, set it up so that you have for tomorrow one value on one square of paper. So, if you want to, if you use the workbook, you can cut out the squares and put one value in each square. If you use an index card or post it notes, one value on each post it note or index card. Or you can just tear pieces of paper and write a value on each torn piece of paper. Whatever system you use, it's totally up to you. But by tomorrow, have one value on one card, because we're going to go through this kind of sorting process where you're going to want to have them separate so that you can move them around and move them into various places. That's it. Do you have any other last minute other suggestions, Heather?
No, just this is a time for you to really think about yourself and your journey through life, and how that those values, those experiences kind of really sculpt who you are, and have kind of moved you into the direction of the person that you are today, and the ones that are more to the direction for who you are more, but you've shied away from for a variety of reasons. I want you to be really unabashedly yourself. I want you to be selfish in this about who and what you are. It's about you and nobody else right now. And if in this journey you discover that there are other people that are equally as important in your life because they are valuable to you, then that's awesome. But you know what? It doesn't have to be. It can be all about you. And I want you to give yourself permission to do that.
Yeah, eventually, I mean, we are going to be talking about balance. Right now, you need to have a moment that's focused totally on you so you can get clear about what you need. We are going to come back to a point where you can figure out how to kind of balance things out between you and others and all of that stuff, because that's an important part of life, right? That's what we're after. We're after balance here. But if you have not been focusing on yourself, if you've been focusing on others, on your boss and your kids and your family and everything else, you need this time to focus on you. And so we're giving you permission right now, tonight, to focus on you, to think about your values, to kind of really deepen and reflect on what is important to you. So that's it for us for today. We will see you tomorrow at this time. Bye,
Have a
everybody.
good night.